So, hello everyone. Welcome to our session today. No authentication and no entry. Sorry. And our speaker for today is Elizabeth from Yahoo. Thank you for joining us today, Elizabeth. And of course, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today and our attendees. And oh, some mistake. Yeah. I'm happy to announce that my colleague Sebastian, who's the technical lead of the CSA, is also part of the moderation today, and he will lead you through the session later on. And just an information for you, we have no presentation today, just a talk between Sebastian and Elizabeth. Yeah, just the information for you before we start. And before, I want to give you a brief overview about the CSA and what we do and what we can offer for your business. Our goal is to increase the quality of commercial emailing, and we act as a neutral interface between mailbox providers and ASPs and brands. And we establish legal and technical quality standards, of course, in cooperation with our partners and certified senders. And all these steps end in our certification that we offer for brands and, of course, ASPs. If you want to get more information about our services, especially our new tool, the CSA Certification Monitor, just come back after the webinar to us and we'll give you everything you need to know about the CSA. And yeah, we have official partners during the entire year, doing the World Webinar Series. It's Harlon and Dimarshan. Thank you both for supporting us during the webinars this year. And if you want to get more information about Harlon or Dimarshan, or maybe both, you can find the sponsoring booklet in the download section. It might be on the right on your screen. There you can find everything you need to know about Harlon and Dimarshan, contact information, and everything else. And thank you again for your support. And of course, we have some housekeeping rules today. No worries, they are short and simple. Please know that you're muted during the whole webinar. Of course, you can ask questions. It's up to you which function you want to use. We have two different functions today. You can use the function raise your hand and ask your questions live. Of course, we would be glad if you use this function and take part of the session with Elizabeth today. And the second function is you can use the chat function. It's also on the right on your screen, and ask your question by submitting them to me, and I will collect all the questions and read them out loud at the end of the session. It's up to you which function you want to use today, but don't be shy. Ask your questions live. We're here for your questions today. And yeah, we have a challenge for you today. We want to know your key facts, your learnings and takeaways. What did you learn from the session today? You can share them via social media. Just use the hashtag CSA live webinars. And of course, we would be glad if you use the hashtag and share them via social media, but of course, you can submit them to us too. And now I'm glad I can hand over to Elizabeth and Sebastian, and you will hear me at the end of the session again. I wish you a lot of fun and a lot of new knowledge. And yeah, Sebastian, you are here, or? But I can't.
You still can't see me, okay? But I am here, definitely.
That's good. I don't know why, but I can't see anyone today, but that's no problem. That's only my problem, but yeah. Okay, yeah, then you can start.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure having a superstar today here at the CSA. Elizabeth, don't laugh, because I remember a New York Times article back in the days, and someone who made it into the New York Times is a superstar for me, you know? And that's why a warm welcome also from my side. Great to talk to you. I would have preferred a coffee together in a lounge, but you know, you are that far away. Corona kept us busy the past 2 years. So I'm happy that we were able to arrange that here. And yeah, let's jump in. And we've got a long list of questions and topics I would love to discuss with you. And I've mentioned the New York Times article already. Elizabeth, are you paranoid? And what is being paranoid for you?
So technically, for quite a while, I was part of the group at Yahoo, the security group, which is known as the Paranoids. So for that while, I was technically a paranoid. Depending on who you ask, the Paranoids have two slogans. One of them is, we aren't paranoid, the entire internet is out to get us. And the other one is, even paranoids have enemies. These are both basically true. I'm not part of that team anymore. I'm part of the mail team. But I maintain that core of knowing the internet is out to get me in my heart.
Cool. Thank you very much for that quite simple explanation. Lovely. And you gave us already a segue into what you're doing. So would you please describe us your job today and the scope and objectives of it?
Yeah, today I run anti-spam and delivery for Yahoo, which is an umbrella brand. So that's Yahoo Mail plus AOL Mail plus we are a white label mailbox provider for a number of smaller companies. And anti-spam and delivery is slightly a misnomer. We do abuse prevention on email, and we also almost deliver email. We send email outbound, and we hand it off to another team that actually writes it into the mailbox.
Right.
Most of delivery.
I guess so. I would wonder if it would have been the other case. But there is a specific reason why we ask you to join the CSA and to have that talk. There is, I would say, from my personal perspective, and I don't know why, the ongoing discussion, and it became much stronger the past 1.5 years about DKIM. I don't know why it became that strong the past 1.5 years, whatever, because it's a quite old standard for authentication already. And that made us, hey, come on, let's talk about you. Let's talk about that topic to you. How does that topic correlate to you directly?
So interestingly, DKIM itself is an extension of technology developed at Yahoo, which is domain keys. So Yahoo was a big player in the development of DKIM, and then a big player, all those sort of big mailbox holders were big players in the development of DMARC. DMARC is an extension of what we used to call private channel. So for a long time, you could have big mailbox holders enforce authentication requirements on your mail, but you basically had to call up humans who typed things into files. And so that made it really only accessible to a handful of brands across the world. And DMARC extends that ability to protect and authenticate mail to anybody who can, figure out what to put in their DNS and what to put in their mail headers.
Got that. And it's funny, there are still, as you've mentioned, domain keys identification, there are still flying emails around where you can find that header. That's kind of funny.
And I find that hysterical because we don't run that code anymore. Right. I don't know if anybody authenticates the domain keys header, but I know that my systems were the first systems to authenticate it. We don't read domain keys headers anymore.
But it's still alive out there. It's the dinosaur.
Nothing dies on the internet. Nothing ever dies on the internet.
That is right. Never forgotten. That's true. You mentioned already the extension to DMARC, and the way we understand it and the way we currently we discussing it with our certified senders, because we are going to ask about, Sebastian, recently you implemented you are requesting and expect DKIM alignment to happen, and does DMARC help and all that stuff around. Basically, it's about brand protection, and brands are the ones that are used as a kind of segue and they are hijacked by spammers to use their reputation, their hard build up reputation to spread their spam across the world. How do you think and would you describe how DKIM and DMARC enhance domain reputation?
So one interesting thing is that as a mailbox holder, we think of DMARC not partly as brand protection, but mostly as user protection. I like brands. Brands are great. My users want mail from brands, but I'm really in it to make the users happy.
Right.
And one reason that we demark yahoo.com is that users believe that the from line on a mail message means something. And DMARC is a way of trying to get the world of email to align with what users expect it to be. It's also a way of protecting your brand. But honestly, I do care if people hijack your brand. I care much more if people send mail to your mother with your email address on it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Human reputation protection is more important to me than brand reputation protection. So yes, DMARC does provide brand protection. Users want brand protection, right? If I get mail from my bank, I want it to be from my bank. DMARC protects a very small thing, right? It says the domain on this mail message is authentic. Can you tell whether that domain actually belongs to your bank? Not DMARC's problem. Can you tell whether the username belongs to the right person? Also not DMARC's problem, but most mailbox providers will at least invoice that for you. So DMARC is doing this small but important thing, whose goal is both brand protection and human protection. DKIM is useful in that because it extends the range of mail you can protect. SPF is a lovely specific protocol, but once you forward mail, SPF can no longer pass in any useful way. So DKIM is what makes authentication survive that forwarding process. As it happens, DKIM also does a bunch of other useful things for us. What DKIM really does is it gives you a way of cryptographically proving that you could read and write an email message, and that this is the same email message you could read and write. And that's important to us because once I know that you could already read this subject line and this from line, I know that anything I tell you about the subject line and this from line is I'm only adding the information I want to add. That is very important to a whole giant pile of privacy lawyers. Also to me, I do not want people throwing around information about my email. So I mentioned privacy lawyers because they have the ability to enforce these things, but I care about it not just because it's illegal to violate people's privacy, but because it's also wrong. So it's a very long answer, but DKIM does these two useful things for us.
I like this long answer because what I love the most is the very first other perspective that you brought in, where you say, hey, I want to protect the users. It's about user protection, not brand protection. That's true. And it should be in the should is the wrong word. It is the same intention of a commerce company to protect their own customers and their own users. So that's what I like most. And exactly to the last points you've mentioned, about the protection of the information you're adding and all that kind of stuff. That also totally makes sense. But that raises one question that I'm currently always confronted with, and I'm seeing. And if I talk to other mailbox providers, so to your colleague Marcel, or to 1&1, or to the guys from Comcast, or to guys from Swisscom, they all still see traffic that are not DKIM authenticated from serious brands. So first question, how can this be? Why? Because the intention about a DKIM is clear, to the point, what you've just described.
One reason this can be, there is not a good correlation between people you want to receive mail from and people who make money by sending you mail. So you would really like to get your utility bill. Your electrical utility is in the business of generating electricity, not in the business of sending email. And so they are exactly as good at sending email as they have to be. Your bank is, with any luck, really good at handling money, but it may not be really good at sending email. And certainly there are many banks who see the internet and see email as a very important part of their business. But there are also banks that have sort of been dragged kicking and screaming onto the internet. They may be using third-party services, but they just don't understand, and they just don't know. And they don't necessarily have a lot of incentive to know.
That's true. And what you're mirroring there is exactly the stuff that our mailbox provider partners and we monitored as well during the early Corona phase, when all those test laboratories and all these official authorities started mailing. In some eye-to-eye conversation, I got the feedback from mailbox providers. It feels like they're sending emails the first time in their life. But now they are sending mass emails and they expect to get that into the inbox. And we've built up filtering mechanisms over years, 15, 20 years, because you have to handle on a daily basis already billions of emails. So you need to have effective filters. And for sure, you relied on authentication of common authentication methods like DKIM and all this kind of stuff. And suddenly those important emails failed simply because to us, common authentication doesn't work. So a simple and direct question to you from your point of view, because this is also a question we are asking ourselves very often. What can we do and how can we help them adopting at least DKIM, train them? And then the next topic related to is when it's not that, I would say, unexperienced senders, and we talk about large brands, we have another discussion because we are unsure adopting DMARC and we are not sure about even BIMI. How can we train them and teach them to make use of it and come and join us in 2022 and not living back in 2000 still?
There are a lot of pieces of that. One of them is outreach to other industry groups. For a lot of things like the coronavirus notifications, government procedures, which are often not to my benefit. I'm not sure anybody loves the idea of government regulation, but they can work very much in our favor, particularly for controlling the actions of the government itself. So edicts can come down. That cuts two ways. We have had instances where a government will say all mail must be authenticated, and then a government division that's incapable of authenticating their mail will come to us and ask us for a manual override to allow their mail to deliver, right?
Okay.
With more than one national government. So those edicts are forcing functions in very important ways, but they also result in this very paradoxical behavior sometimes. So industry pressure for whatever industry centers are in is very useful. You don't have to educate all of them, you just have to get key ones. And you have to get key service providers to the industry, regulators for the industry.
Mm-hmm.
We had beautiful experiences when the U.S. Postal Service, which for a postal service does very little other than mail. But when they went to send out COVID testing stuff, that was a gorgeous, gorgeous rollout. So outreach is key. Complaining as a user can be useful. One of the key things about DMARC is its reporting functions. And those reporting functions are there just to allow these, mostly to allow these uncertain companies to see what will happen if they turn it on. So for DMARC, it's pretty easy. You say, put a DMARC record in with a reporting address, use a service that will read the report for you, and you will know what's going to happen. You will know two things. First of all, you will know that people are forging your mail. This is true for all sorts of people. We're like, why would I want to do this? Nobody is ever going to forge our mail. People are forging your mail. People, many senders are like, where's all this stuff coming from? Why did I not know this existed before? But it also tells you who's sending mail as you. If you're a relatively small company, you may be like, how can you not know, right? How can you not know who's sending mail as you? The number of services that big companies use and the number of functions those services have, we may contract with somebody who does customer service satisfaction surveys for us. Could be a different person from the people who do customer service for us. Until I dealt with our DMARC records, did not know that there are services that send mail to governments for big companies. There's a whole separate service sending email their own way as us. Dozens upon dozens upon dozens of these little services that need to be you because you're paying them to be you, and that aren't running through any centralized authority. Like our legal department contracts with multiple outside services to send mail as us. They're not, you would think you go to the people who own the brand and you say, who is our brand? And they know. They do not.
Right.
And this is true for every company of our size. And we're not that big. We're big, but we're not that big. It just gets worse from here.
Right. Totally get you on that. That makes sense. Along the lines with DMARC, and I've mentioned it already as we published the new CSA criteria or the updated CSA criteria in January. The alignment topic came up first time extensively with DMARC, and we are requiring DKIM alignment. I had a long discussion about the term, but because DKIM alignment itself is not defined anywhere as the term, but I've chosen this kind of term to explain, okay, we are looking for an alignment to the DKIM signature. We are not yet going the step into DMARC direction, not that deep, but we want to slightly put the first steps into that direction. And what does alignment mean to you? From your point of view, to what extent should be alignment in place? And how can it help already to push adoption like DMARC and BEMI at the very end?
Yeah, so because we use DKIM signatures for multiple things, I do not necessarily care whether a DKIM signature is aligned. And aligned is a funky term because there's just a lot of things in a mail message you could be aligned to. Be aligned to the from, you could be aligned to the reply to, you could be aligned to the mail from. These could all be different. The world is a very, very complex place. But if we're talking about from alignment, I like things to have from alignment because the end user cares about from. The brand cares about reply to because it's really annoying when people send mail with your reply to that isn't from you. There are a bunch of brands learned that just recently. So alignment to from, I like alignment to from. I would like that alignment in my preferred world. That alignment would be perfect alignment or parent alignment, which is to say, if your mail from is nobody at wesendemail.nobody.com, I would like a DKIM signature for wesendemail.nobody.com or one for nobody.com. There's a lot of argument about this, but I get a lot of DMARC passing mail where that DKIM signature is for I like DKIM.nobody.com. Right. So that's a sibling style alignment. I do not like that. And I do not like that because it's a security problem.
Okay.
So don't do that. Eventually that's going to not work. But right now people do that. Just as you go forward, avoid that configuration. Make it same domain or parent domain.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. Elizabeth, if you don't mind, we've got a live question from Brian. Brian, if you want to, please unmute yourself and ask your question directly. I unmuted you. Brian, go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome.
I actually raised my hand inadvertently, but couldn't figure out how to unraise it. But thanks for the session. So I need to come up with a great question for Elizabeth.
Okay, cool. No worries.
What else? Let's see. What is new in the world of DMARC 2.0, if anything, Elizabeth?
Not a lot. Most of the changes to DMARC are around refining and tightening things. So people are worrying about making the specification more exact. People are worried about that precise bug around sibling alignment. People are worried about how you determine what a organizational domain is, which mostly, here's the problem. So yahoo.com, that would be Yahoo. That's easy. What about yahoo.co.uk? Do I want .co.uk to be able to put policies in place? I do not. So even at a very even at a very superficial level, when you just start looking at the problem, it's hard to determine where you put the boundary between the registry and something where the organization is responsible. And the way we do that right now is to use a random list maintained by Mozilla. That's the state of the art. Again, the internet is a very weird place. Many things evolve in interesting ways. That is not a good answer. It makes it very hard to keep track of, if I start selling subdomains of Yahoo, who gets to control that mail? So that's a big worry that people look at as we look at DMARC. What do we do that is both efficient, enforceable, correct around figuring out who can set policy for what domains? That's tricky right now because there are things that are listed as not being administrative domains that want to enforce policy. Co.uk doesn't enforce policy. Gov.uk would really like to enforce policy on, they're like, we are the government of the UK. We're allowed to control all our departments, which is great, but I have a file that says they can't do that. So.
Okay, Brian, is that okay? Does that help? Was that the answer? Was that the improvised answer of the improvised question?
It was a great improvised question and answer. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Elizabeth, I do have 3 other questions coming from the group. If you don't mind, I jump into that questions because that absolutely makes sense from my point of view. If you already described, or we are into the DMARC topic, I will add up that question here from Kent. Kent, are you willing to ask your question yourself, or are you shy and I should read it out? You are not shy, I know you. Okay, anyway, Kent is asking, what do you feel about mailbox providers that ignore the DMARC P equals value, such as ignoring P equals reject when an email fails?
It's a tricky question. I prefer people to enforce DMARC wherever possible. And I prefer that in lots of senses. I prefer that as somebody who helped develop DMARC. I prefer that as somebody who doesn't like having my email forged, all of those things. At the same time, do I prefer you to do that in all circumstances? Most mailbox providers are running some manual overrides for domains. There are cases in which senders say things they do not mean to say, and we prioritize delivering mail the sender wishes to deliver and the user wishes to receive over paying attention to records published by people who don't realize what effect they're going to have. So should you in general enforce P equals reject? Yes, 100% do that. That is better. Am I going to call you out if there are cases in which you rationally decide not to do that? No, because that would be hypocritical.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Kent, I hope that answered the question. A question from Ekaterina. It goes back to the forging of emails. What would you recommend to do when someone is forging your emails?
Turn on DMARC. That is literally the only thing you can do, right? Unless you are extraordinarily lucky. So if you are in a position to use law enforcement to complain about that, that's fun. It tends to take 5 years to achieve anything whatsoever. And I don't know about other companies, but even when we win in court, we very rarely collect.
Hmm.
So what can you do? When you're dealing with forged email, you're usually dealing with email that starts outside of your control and ends outside of your control. All you can do is turn on DMARC and hope that the receiving end will enforce for you. It's back to why I want people to enforce.
Right. It always comes back to that. It's always to the point, but we're in between that. I mean, we as experts, for you, it's straightforward. Turn on DMARC, but in whatever conference I'm in, or panel discussion or presentation, it is. I mean, we know the statistics about DMARC adoption, right? But on the other hand, we also know that email fraud is increasing. And it's always the same question. How can we close that gap? How can we convince brands to make use of DMARC? I'm not talking about use DMARC for fighting against your email fraud. It is make use of it. You get to know at least the reporting function you've mentioned. You get to know the black box, what's going on with your domain, and who's treating your users, your customers, your contacts badly. And yeah, but the adoption is still very, I would describe it as very rare, to be honest. And so how can we get those folks to make use of it and then set it up? So it always comes back to, I think this will keep us busy for years still.
Yeah. And companies who get forged at large scale usually do turn DMARC on. Because literally it's the only thing you can do. Like you don't have 1,000 other choices.
Right.
But a lot of companies don't notice, are incapable of noticing, or believe entirely correctly that there are lots of other ways to defraud their users, right? DMARC is an important tool, but at the same time, you can get DMARC passes on very bad mail. You probably will, because if we go back to, for your utility company, you want to receive their mail, they don't make any money sending it. Who makes money sending mail? Well, I mean, lots of big commercial businesses do, but you know who else does? Bad people. That's their, right? Sending bad mail is how they make money.
Yes.
And therefore, they are very capable of complying with standards. It doesn't eat into their profit margin to comply with standards. Now,
So if
they have to, but
if I get you right, it is the kind of story like, dear brand, stop the spammers earning your money.
that's a much better story. Let's go with that story.
That's how, you know, between the line or at the very end, I'm still thinking like, yeah, the email marketer out there without our technical knowledge, right? The stuff we're talking about today here is on the one hand to our senders, so to folks that are dealing with that technical business on a daily basis like we do, but they are talking to their clients, which is an e-commerce shop or which is a non-profit organization. I mean, they don't even think about earning money. They only want to do good things, support whatever, who needs help, and convincing them and turning out, it always, the keyword value is very often used in that kind of stuff, right? And that's why I'm asking that, or I made that statement kind of blunt and naive, because in most cases it's exactly that, right? And
yeah.
I also had the discussions about BIMI, because I had the feeling that the goal of BIMI was to push DMARC, to give this dry technical standard or reporting standard, a little more flavor, and yeah, hang the carrot in front of the sending brand to say, hey, your logo is shown up. That gives additional authentication. But even that didn't give a huge push. Why?
Again, I think a lot of senders don't really care that much about email. But for a sender, one of the things that BIMI gives them is actually control over what logo shows up.
Right.
We, as a mailbox holder, would like your inbox to look pretty. So if we can find a logo that we think is correct, probably going to put up a logo because it's just going to make you happier. But we're going to put up whatever, if we have to do that, we're going to put up whatever logo we like, fundamentally, right? And if you would like some control over what that logo is and how that logo looks and whether it matches your branding today rather than your branding a year and a half ago when we picked it off the internet somewhere, BIMI gives you a way of doing that.
Right.
There's a lot of variation in how much brands care about that. Some of them care very, very passionately. Your logo is off by like 2 pixels. My life has been damaged. Some of them are like, it looks kind of like my logo. I'm good. So there's a lot of variation in that. I think BIMI does give brands some more control over their logo. I think that's probably good. Honestly, I don't think BIMI increases security of the user at all, because I don't think the user can reliably tell your logo from pretty much the same color bits. Like, that's a really small space and users are not paying attention. There's a lot of user studies on how much does the little lock on a website influence user behavior.
Right.
And it's been studied 47 ways from Sunday, and the answer is it does not.
Right.
Like,
right.
Users do not care. You can take college students who are accessing their own bank account, still don't pay any attention to the law. So user behavior is very, very difficult to change. Users are going to do what they're going to do. They're going to be humans looking at a thing, going through the thing, moving fast. You can't change user behavior in 16 by 16 bits. Doesn't matter what those bits show. But you can have your logo, you can hope that that resonates, and you can prevent the bad mail from delivering to the user at all.
Right.
So I resonate much more with DMARC because my goal is to not deliver the bad mail. Because I don't know how to make the user not click on the bad mail.
Right. If I know there's someone out there who's misusing my identity, my domain identity, I don't even want them or want to have you accepting that email because it's not me. Right. Totally get that.
But having your logo appear next to your mail is a happy thing, and being able to control that logo rather than letting me pick what I think that logo should be is also a happy thing for a brand.
Right. Cool. Lovely. Thank you. There's 2 questions from Tara. One question I find very interesting because that's also an ongoing discussion I'm having with our senders. I'm reading out that question. As an ESP with very small senders, I imagine brands, we are struggling to figure out how to make our customers mail compliant when they don't own their own domain. Good example, many of them are using addresses such as company name @gmail.com. We see this very often in very small organizations, or the other day we had the comparison to the church choir. The boss of the church choir is also organizing her or his own email list, and they are using the free available mass email tools out there, but they still send from their own email address. And for sure, mass guys who are dealing with mass mailing say, okay, you should use your branded domain, but I don't own a domain like choirowner.com or whatever. So what's your opinion on that?
That is a really hard one, because users in that space are very constrained, right? As a big mailbox holder, what I'm going to tell you is do not send bulk mail from my platform. My platform is for individual humans. Bad things will happen if you send bulk mail from my platform. You need to send bulk mail from a bulk mailer.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you that is what my terms of service says. That is what my terms of service is.
Good question.
For
What is
business.
bulk mail?
What?
When does bulk mail start? At 20, at 50, at 100, at 200, at 500?
That is a very fascinating question. The answer depends on very many things, one of which is how many people hate your email. If you want to invite 500 people to your wedding, or 500 people is not a big Indian wedding.
That's right.
Okay, so you might want to invite 2,000 people to your wedding. I would like you to be able to do that from my platform. Gonna be hard for me to manage, but I would like you to be able to do that. Please invite your friends to your wedding. Would I want you to be trying to sell them things? What if you're a DJ? Where is the line between your friends and your gigs and your... This is why we have a whole team, and this is why we have rules that have exceptions upon exceptions and fiddling, and this is why when you ask me exactly what the rules are, I'm like, the rules depend. Do the 1,000 people you are sending mail to want your mail? Then maybe I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is it fraudulent? Maybe I don't like that, regardless of whether they like it or not. All of these things are very hard to do, to decide. This is not like I can look at it and go, no. This is complicated and hard to make work. But if you want to sell, if your church choir has 800 people in it, I'm probably going to have trouble making that work. There's probably going to be non-deliveries. There's probably going to be people who don't like your mail. There's probably going to be all that stuff. I'm probably going to have a difficulty with maintaining that for you day in and day out. If you're trying to sell your book, I'm not even going to try to maintain that for you. I'm going to go, that's straightforward commercial mail. It's outside of our terms of service. If I notice it, I'm not going to let that mail go.
Right.
So here you are, you want to send bulk mail, you have an email address, I won't let you send bulk mail. What do you do? And the answers there are relatively unbeautiful, right? You can buy a domain, domains are cheap, invest $5. Yeah, will that help? Maybe. You're not wrong as an individual human in believing that even if you can afford a domain, it's like being able to afford a puppy, right?
Right.
It's not the purchase price that's the problem, it's the ongoing maintenance.
That's a good point. So if I got you right, it's basically because that would be one question, and maybe you answered it already. How can ESPs help those tiny sending
Yeah.
clients.
And the
And if I
answer is you give them a mailbox in the ESP owned space.
right, that
You
was
make
one
part of the
suggestion that we,
service.
right, that we discussed as well. So if your tiny client is not able to maintain an own domain, set up the brand.esp.com domain and let them send through that. Or on the other hand, you're right. I mean, a .com domain, I don't know, it's $10, $12, $15 a year. And if it could be a service through the ESP to say, hey, I don't own the domain, but I have no clue how to manage this domain, but can you please buy and rent that for me? Can you manage that for me? I can't, I mean, at the very end, it would mean a lot of effort and maybe some operative work for the ESP. I don't know what that means in costs, but it could be a good idea, and it could be a nice service from the ESPs to say, okay, if you don't know how, we buy your branded domain, we manage it for you, and here's a kind of legal term that manages the contractual relation between the two of us.
Yeah.
I like that idea, if I got you right on that point. I like that.
Yeah. And somebody needs to have a domain that they're willing to send bulk mail from that they can control. So either the SP can provide space in a domain of their own, or they can manage a domain for the customer. Domains aren't that expensive, but dealing with them well requires effort and knowledge.
Tara is having another question, and that's an interesting one because Alex from Comcast asked it to me the other days. ESPs are seeing more and more, and obviously Alex as well, seeing DKIM replay attacks picking up again. So it looks like an increase of it. Our signature is being replayed and sent out outside of our network, DMARC or not. These are being accepted. And then our D domain is being degraded. Do you have advice for senders being hit by this?
I have one immediate piece of advice, which is I see zero change in DKIM replay as I know it. Because when I talk about DKIM replay, I mean a DKIM signature that passes. And mere months ago, this was not a distinction I thought I needed to make. Don't assign reputation to failing DKIM signatures. A failing DKIM signature means nothing. Like cryptographically, it means nothing. If it doesn't pass, it's not a DKIM signature. It's some random bits.
Right.
And that's what's going on in this case. There are bad actors who are stealing templates. They take an entire mail, they pull out, they may actually glom things together. More important than the DKIM signatures fail. So it's a relatively easy mistake to make, but don't pay attention to a failed DKIM signature. More important than that, this is bad mail with people's URLs in it. And that makes it that's much easier to get confused about. Right. Also, they changed the from lines, which is why the DKIM doesn't pass. None of these copied DKIM passes, none of them 0. But they don't always change the reply to. And that is a pain.
Okay. I think, I think the question from Tara was more, how can a sender, I mean, if the email is already sent and someone is picking up and misusing it, it is out of the control of the sender. Is there something for a sender to do something against it in advance? And Tara is asking on top of it, these DKIM signatures are passing checks during DKIM replay.
Okay, so that may be true at other providers. I am not seeing passing checks.
Okay.
The number of passing DKIM checks I'm seeing is unchanged.
Okay, I see.
And there we have the thing that centers can do that may or may not work, depending on who pays attention, is to timestamp their DKIMs. You can put an expiration time on it. That will limit the length of time it can be reused. Our systems actually, because DKIM reply of passing signatures was a problem for us in the past, we count how many times we see the same DKIM signature.
Right.
And unless you are a sender who habitually gives us large volumes of mail with identical signatures on it, we're gonna stop accepting them after a bit.
Right.
But I don't know where people are seeing. I cannot see other people's mail. That may be a very valid problem other places. I see a lot of DKIM signatures that are copied and pasted, and they are nowhere near passing. I see
Right.
very large volumes of them, but no volume at all of pass.
Okay. Thank you for that specific stuff. We are nearly at the top of the hour, and we've got many. I've got a loads of questions to you. I think I would love to fill up 2 or 3 hours with you, Elizabeth. I've got one question I'm discussing, and I've been asked a lot about IPv6. CSA is known for certifying IP lists so far. And I strongly believe IPv6 may solve the issue of load balancing and serving more clients, but IPv6 will not resolve any of the fraud issues and all that kind of stuff, the challenges we are facing with. What's your position, your personal position and your professional position to that question in the last 2 minutes?
Yeah, IPv6 isn't attempting to solve any of these fraud problems, and it's not going to. Thank you, goodbye. Right, so there's that. There are a lot of widespread beliefs about IPv6. My data about IPv6 is almost all about customer IPv6. We do not run IPv6 MTAs at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Customer IPv6 does not look like the IPv6 of rumor.
Mm-hmm.
We do not see, for instance, more variety in IPv6 addresses than we do in IPv4 addresses.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In theory, we should be able to see, if we see a user, we might expect to see more IPv6 addresses for that user than IPv4.
Mm-hmm.
A bigger space, people could be using a lot more of it. We don't tend to see that a lot. It looks like most people who use IPv6 are used to using IPv4, and they allocate IPv6 much the same way they allocate IPv4.
I see.
So basically, adoption is slow. Poster child for slow adoption. Sorry. And most of the hype does not appear to be correct to me. It's kind of IPv4 only bigger.
Right, I've got the same impression, and I'm a big fan of domain stuff. We can nail it down to brands. We can clearly identify senders, and IPv6 is still abstract, and it's just enriching shared infrastructures that makes it harder to identify fraud, spammers, or misbehavior. So yeah.
The world is moving from IPs to domains. We always believed that would be driven by IPv6. Rational belief. It's driven by cloud.
Right.
I mean, the change is there. The change is real, but it's not actually driven by what we expect it to be driven.
Right. And I like, as a last statement, or your last point, I liked it, the future is domain, and that's what I really love. And yeah, thanks for that. It's 6 p.m. my time. Elizabeth, it was lovely. There's Maike. Hello, Maike. We're a little
Hello
bit over.
again. No, it's okay.
It was an interesting chat. Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Maike, now it's
Yeah.
your turn.
Good
Yeah.
to talk.
No, thank you again, Elizabeth, for your time today. And I like to follow your conversation here. And thank you, attendees, for your questions. And if you have further questions the next days, just write them to us or directly to Elizabeth. It's up to you. And yeah, thank you for joining us today. And check out our website for the next webinars. And yeah, thank you again. Thank you, Sebastian, of course, too. Thank you.
Elizabeth, thank you. I was only asking. Elizabeth was answering.
Cool. Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a
Bye.
good day, Elizabeth. Bye.